Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Worton. This podcast is all about our journey into the woods of ourselves, getting to know who we are, and where we're going in life so that we can create the life that we want to live. It's about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. It's also about mindset. Our beliefs are such an important part of this journey, and there are so many ways for us to change our mindset so that we can more easily live a life of expansive joy. This podcast is also about going literally into the woods and spending time in nature, and how that can help us on our own personal journey of self-knowledge. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now let's get into this week's episode. Hello, adventurers, and welcome to the Into the Woods podcast, episode 461. This is your host, Holly Worton, and I'm back with another solo episode. Today, I'm going to talk about adventures on the coast to coast, because I just got back from the coast to coast. Now, it feels like ages since I've done a solo podcast episode, but for you, it was only 2 weeks. And that's because I pre-recorded those 2 solo episodes, obviously, before I left. But I feel like I'm still landing from this trip. So these are really kind of my first impressions, and I spent quite a long time putting together the notes for this episode, so I'm really looking forward to sharing this with you. And I'm also aware that my kind of deeper thoughts are going to come when I write a book about this trail, because I really, really loved it. I had a great time, and I'm excited to share it with you. So let's get started. First of all, what is this trail? You may or may not have heard of Wainwright's Coast to Coast Walk. It is one of the most popular and most well-known long-distance trails here in Britain. And people come from all over the world to do it. In fact, we met a guy from Australia who was doing it. I've seen videos from people from all over the world. We saw a couple of Americans. When I came back, I started looking for YouTube videos about people who had been on the trail while we were doing it, and I found another couple of Americans who were doing it the other way around from the way that we did it. So this is a very popular route. What is it? A coast-to-coast walk was devised by Alfred Wainwright, and his guidebook to the route was published in 1973. So this trail is as old as I am, which is exciting. So who was Wainwright? If you're not from the UK, you might not have heard of him. He was a British fell walker, guidebook author, and illustrator. What are fells, you may be asking? Fells are the mountains and hills of the north of England, so the Lake District and the Pennine Dales. And this is a word that comes from Old Norse, the Old Norse language, which of course was spoken by the Vikings. And the Vikings, which I didn't know this until I actually moved to the UK and started spending time up in the north doing walking stuff, but the Viking Age, when the Vikings were hanging out and invading Britain, lasted approximately from 800 to 1150 AD. They first invaded in 793, and their last invasion was in 1066. This is interesting and it's notable because a lot of place names in the north of England are derived from Old Norse. So you'll come across a lot of words you might not have heard of before, like beck, which means stream, dale, which means valley, and tarn, which means lake. And there are so many other ones. A lot of place names and natural elements, lakes and valleys and streams, have these Old Norse words. So, where is Wainwright's Coast to Coast Walk? It goes from St. Bees Head in the west, on the west coast on the Irish Sea, to Robin Hood's Bay in the east, on the east coast on the North Sea. And it's about 192 miles long, which is just over 300 kilometers. And there are many different variations of this route, which is why it's kind of hard to pin down exactly how long it is, because you have a lot of options, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. So how is Wainwright's Coast to Coast different from other trails? I really enjoyed this trail. It's so different from everything else I've ever done, partly because I'd never done a long distance walk in the north of England. I'd always done walks in the south of England in lowland conditions. I've always walked either national trails or kind of the smaller local trails. This is different. It's not yet a national trail. They've been trying to get it made a national trail for a few years now. We will see. But for now, it's an unofficial trail. It goes across the entire width of England, from west coast to east coast. And most notably, you pass through 3 national parks. So you pass through the Lake District, the Yorkshire Dales, and the North York Moors, which is exciting because you're going through 3 very different types of scenery and wildlife. You have such a variety of views and experiences. We saw red squirrels for the first time. I saw red deer for the first time. There were birds everywhere. It was just absolutely wonderful. It was filled with wildlife and filled with lambs. So it's lambing season here now. And there were so many different breeds of sheep that I'd never seen before. From coast to coast, it was just sheep and lambs everywhere, in addition to the native wildlife. So it was just really lovely to see kind of both agriculture and wilderness, and just wonderful. Another way that the coast to coast is different from other trails, at least in my experience, is that there were so many honesty boxes. And this is something I've not seen much of on other trails in the UK. And the Ridgeway, if you might remember if you've read my book or you've heard me talk about it, there's a church that offers tea and cake and coffee, and that's really nice if you're tired and you want to pop in and get a snack. There were a couple of churches along the coast to coast that did this, but there were just people who set up honesty boxes. So you'd be walking through a little village and you would see like a stand with a cooler, and you would find juices and other drinks. And there were some people that had farms that had like a summer house set up with a kettle with hot water for tea and coffee. They had a refrigerator and snacks, both savory and sweet. I've never seen anything like this before. It's fantastic because you'd be tired and you'd want to break and you'd want to sit down and put your feet up, and then you'd come across this place where you could do so. It was fantastic. I really, really enjoyed that. A lot of these were marked in my guidebook, but some of them were a surprise. And of course they come and go because these are just volunteers who are doing this. And you just pop your money in an honesty box and have a seat, eat your snacks, and then go on your way. Another thing is that it's easy to camp along the whole route, which is not always easy on some other trails. Wild camping is not permitted in most of England and Wales. However, it is generally tolerated or accepted in the Lake District. And of course, as long as you're camping in a place that no one sees you, no one's going to know. So as long as you're being smart about how you do it, it is also possible to wild camp along large parts of the route. Another thing, as I said earlier, is that it's not one fixed route. It's got lots of different alternative routes. So there are places where you get to, say, a lake, and you can go around the right-hand side of the lake or the left-hand side of the lake. And you've got sometimes a high route and a low route. And you have all these decisions to make based on weather conditions, temperature, time of year, because there is one section where they're trying to manage erosion. And so depending on the month of the year, you have to choose one of 3 different routes. I liked having the different alternative routes because we could choose based on what kind of adventure we wanted to have, and based on how we were feeling each day, and based on the weather. So when did I walk the coast to coast and why? I did it from May 1st to the 15th. So it was 14 and third days of walking. It was just kind of a short morning and the last day. We were planning to wild camp for much of it, and we wanted to be sure there would still be water available to filter for drinking. So that's why we did it this time of year. If we had done it in the summer, first of all, it would be way too hot for my preferences, and second of all, there wouldn't have been as much water for the days that we were wild camping and we needed to filter water. And in the lakes, there was still a lot of water. There was water everywhere, and that was one of the things that I loved about the Lake District. There were so many streams and waterfalls and rivers and lakes, of course. It was just, it was wonderful. I loved it. So why did I hike the coast to coast? Basically because 2 friends invited me to go with them, so I thought it was the perfect opportunity to do the trail. Now, prior to this, I'd been aware of the Coast to Coast Trail, but it wasn't really on my list of trails that I wanted to walk. And I've got a blog post, which I'll link to in the show notes. It's called My Walking Bucket List, which I actually need to update. But it wasn't on that list. Like, I was aware of it, and I thought, oh, that's nice, but it hadn't really gone beyond that. But having this opportunity to do it with friends meant that I was excited to do it. So we have been talking about doing this since late last year. I don't know whether it was October or November of last year. Originally, there's supposed to be 4 of us going, and then one person was unable to go, so 3 of us started the trail. Now, this was a big step up from my usual adventures, where I usually walk every day for a week or so, or less, and I stay at B&Bs. This time it was 2 weeks instead of one, and we were camping all along the way. So that meant I had to carry more stuff. More on that in a minute because I carried too much stuff. But this was a big step up in terms of adventures, and I've known for the last couple of years that the next time I did a trail, I wanted to camp it instead of staying at B&Bs. But I was originally planning to do the Dales Way, which I would still like to do. But this was different. So how did I feel about this trail beforehand? I was really excited to do it because, again, it was new and exciting. It was definitely a step outside of my comfort zone for the reasons I've mentioned. And I was also a bit apprehensive about going with other people, particularly people who were taller and stronger than me and who had more experience with this kind of thing. I was afraid that I was just going to not be able to make it or get stuck or I don't know. I had a lot of fears. So I was a bit nervous about the trip, but also really excited. I remember we had a Zoom call the day before we went up to St. Bees. And I remember feeling what another friend that didn't go on the trip calls nerve-sighted. It's like you're nervous and you're excited at the same time. And it's like that kind of like a child before Christmas. And you're like, oh, it's going to be exciting tomorrow, but also kind of nervous. So that's how I felt. And it went really, really well. I'm so glad that I made this trip a priority, even when lots of other things were going on in my life. That meant that I might have to miss out on this trip. I was kind of touch and go for the last couple of months as to whether or not I was actually going to be able to go, but I was stubborn and I stuck with it and it happened. It went really well also in the sense that it was good to share this experience with other people. And I'm really happy that I did it with the people I did it with. I think I got really lucky by having my first group adventure with really good people. And I will be extra picky in the future about choosing other people to go with if I do decide to do something like this again. Because there are so many things that could go wrong in terms of group dynamic. And you constantly got to be adjusting plans based on weather and fitness and recovery and reality. And I think we did a really good job of that. And I think we got along really well. And I think that was really lucky. So I went with these people who were very easy to get along with, and that is something that I'll be looking for in the future if I decide to do this kind of thing with other people. I learned a lot about just, like, you've just constantly got to be, like, evaluating stuff, especially in a trip where you're camping and you have the luxury of staying in different places and different nights and not having to walk to a fixed location every day like I used to when I was doing B&Bs. So I think I got really lucky with going with the right people. And again, I would be very picky about that in the future. So my advice to you, if you're thinking about doing a new adventure with other people, is really make sure that you can get along with these people and that they're easy people to be with. They're not the kind of people who are going to get upset over little details, and they're just flexible and, I don't know, easy. You know what I'm talking about. Some people are easy to get along with and some people aren't. So what was it like walking with other people compared to my usual solo adventures? And I think this is something that was very different. So first of all, there was less time and space for inner reflection, which was fine. It just meant that it was a different experience. You know, I'm so used to being out on the trail on my own for hours on end and being in my own inner world. So this was very different because obviously I was sharing the experience with other people. I also ended up stretching outside of my comfort zone with longer days. Now, when I first started thinking about doing trail by myself and backpacking, I was thinking, oh, well, this is a stretch for me. It's going to be a new fitness level. So I'm going to have to keep the days really short, maybe 10-mile days. That's what I was thinking. And if I'd gone alone, I probably would have kind of coddled myself by planning a longer trip with 10-mile day maximum. But that's not how it worked out because I was with other people. So we had longer days. And thanks to that, I now know that I'm capable of more than I thought I was. So we had a couple of long 20-mile days, and that was really challenging with a big pack. And that's good. Like, I did it. I'm fine. I survived. And I now know that I'm capable of putting in longer miles than I thought I was. So that's really good. And that's something that I got from doing this with other people as opposed to doing it alone. Now, I'm also fearful about solo wild camping, and I've never actually done it. But I felt perfectly safe doing it with other people. So that means that I now feel safer about going wild camping alone, especially in remote places like the Lake District, because there's no one else there. The 2 nights that we went wild camping, we were the only ones there. And the one night especially, we were up quite high near a tarn, and that's a lake. And there was no one there. I mean, we saw this guy wild camping that we knew that we'd crossed paths with on the trail a few days earlier. He was far down in the valley, kind of by the river, but we were just all alone up there. So that makes me feel really safe. And I think that I now feel safe enough to give it a try on my own. So we shall see, and I will update you about that. I'll let you know when it happens. So I think it's always important for me whenever I come back from an adventure to evaluate what I did well and what I could do better. So there will, of course, be more in-depth reflection on this in the book as time goes on and I have more time to integrate the experience. But for now, one thing that I did well was to buy merino wool. Now, if you heard in last week's episode with Catherine, the 5-kilo traveler, we talked about merino wool and how it's very kind of smell-proof and it stays fresh. And I have to say, I was a skeptic and now I'm a convert. It's really, really good. So I bought merino wool sleep thermals that were very warm and snuggly, and I bought 2 mixed blend merino base layers. So those were what I bought first. And I wasn't sure I wanted to commit to the expensive pricing of merino wool, so I bought these base layers at Decathlon that were merino wool under the arms, and there was a back panel that was merino, and the rest of it was synthetic. So that meant it was cheaper because it was only kind of half of the shirt was merino. And it worked really well. It was great. I cannot believe how fresh the shirt stayed compared to things like my fleece, which was synthetic and it didn't smell great. So that's making me realize I would like to update, kind of upgrade and get a merino wool, either like a hoodie or something to replace a fleece as a mid-layer, because that would be really practical and it wouldn't smell like fleece always smells because it's synthetic. Another thing I did really well was flip-flops, taking flip-flops for camp shoes. Now, I usually have flip-flops with me or some other pair of shoes for camping, but this time I packed so much, my pack was so big, and I thought, oh, should I bring camp shoes? Should I not? And I did, and I'm so glad I did, because my feet were in a lot of pain throughout the entire trip, and having those flip-flops really made a difference. I mean, I was able to put them on in the evening and just walk around and let my feet air out and rest and stretch out. So that was really, really good. So definitely I'm bringing camp shoes forever. Poles I found to be absolutely necessary, in part because I had a huge backpack. Now, I've seen some videos talking about the coast to coast saying that you don't need poles. However, I think everyone I saw had poles, and I have to say I could not have done it without poles. And again, that's partly because my pack was quite large and heavy, but you've got so many ups and downs, especially in the Lake District. I could not have done it without poles, so I did well in bringing poles. Also with my water system, so I brought both a bladder and bottles for water. And that was really good because I could use the bladder as I was walking, and I would only fill it up with like half a liter each day. And then I would use the bottles when I was sitting down and having a break, and I would just down more water then. So that was really convenient, and I liked having both systems. So that was good, because in the past I've only brought one or the other, but not both. What could I improve on? So, packing. My backpack, which you may have seen on Instagram, it was huge, and it weighed 21 kilos with all my food and water. So I could have improved on packing. There were some things that I doubled up on, which I shouldn't have. So usually when I go on a walk, I bring my iPad with a keyboard and I type up all of my notes from the day. And that means that when I get home, I have usually 20,000 words already written for the book, which is great. But this time I didn't want to have another device to charge. So I thought, well, I'll bring a journal. But then I thought, oh, I don't know how much space I'm going to take up in writing. So I thought, well, I better bring 2 journals. No. That didn't work, and I ended up posting the second journal back home to me when I saw a post office about day 5. So I would leave behind the second journal. I brought a long sleeve base layer that I didn't need, and I added it to my pack at the last minute. And the only reason I added it was because we had really cold nights, kind of the last 3 days leading up to the trip, and I just got scared and thought I needed to be warm, but I didn't need it. I also brought a second pair of reading glasses, which I did not need. And the reason I brought them was because my husband said, you should bring a second pair of reading glasses, because we had just watched this video of this guy in the Coast to Coast who lost his main glasses and his backup glasses. So yeah, I didn't need those. I also brought a second water filter. So I had a Sawyer Squeeze, which is what I use most of the time, but I also had it was a brand new Solomon. It's like a soft flask that comes with a filter. And I filled that up once just to test it out, and I didn't need that. I could have just used the Sawyer Squeeze. I didn't need a second water filter. There were 3 of us with water filters. If mine had failed, I would have had 2 other ones to use as a backup. I also brought a second power bank, and I did that because we were all bringing 2 power banks, and I didn't realize there would be so many opportunities to charge my stuff on the route. And I doubled up on a lot of things that I shouldn't have doubled up on. And they say, don't pack your fears, and that's kind of what I did. So don't do that. I also brought an emergency bivvy that's kind of like a silver blanket in a bag, but that wasn't necessary because I had a tent and a sleeping bag. So if I had broken my leg or injured myself and I needed to sit and wait until mountain rescue came, my tent and sleeping bag would be a lot warmer than the emergency bivvy bag thing. So that's something that I bring when I do day hikes, but I did not need it on this trip. And it's not heavy, it's very small and it's lightweight, but I didn't need it. So I should have left it at home. Finally, midge spray. So there was one Coast to Coast video I saw that mentioned midges being a problem, and so I brought midge spray and a net. Didn't use them the entire time because it's not midge season, which I know they don't come out until the summer, but still, I brought it. So there were a handful of things that I didn't need. The weight of those things, I don't think would be more than 1 kilo, but it took up space and it was extra lightweight. So I would definitely leave those things behind. And I'm going to be looking to upgrade some gear. So the stove that I usually use is the Jetboil Minimo, which I always liked, but it's big and it's bulky and it's kind of heavy. So I could upgrade that to a pocket rocket, which has kind of been on my radar for a while, but I've never felt the need to get it. Now I feel the need to get it. Compression bags. So the guys that I was traveling with had really great compression bags for their clothes, and had a good compression bag for their sleeping bag, whereas I just use the compression bag that comes with my sleeping bag. Now, if you're compressing your stuff, obviously that's not going to magically make them lighter, but it will make them smaller. So it would have meant that just stuff would have fit in my pack easier and it wouldn't have been as big and bulky. And finally, backpack. I had an Osprey backpack, which I love. It was really comfortable. The bag was heavy. It was way too much for me. But when it was on my back, it felt great. Had some chafing on my hips. But aside from that, it was really, really good. But it's heavy. I think it weighs 2.2 kilos when it's empty. So I might be looking into getting an ultralight pack. And I've been looking at Atom packs. And I'll link to all this in the show notes. I don't know, we'll see. It's an investment, but I think I want one, so we'll see. And finally, foot care. That was kind of my big mistake. Keep your feet dry, which I know, and I would take different measures to keep my feet dry in the future. I don't know what. I need to reevaluate this and think what I could do better. I would like to bring next time more KT tape for prevention and aftercare. Found KT tape to be really useful on this trip, even more so than Compeed, for spots where there was friction and rubbing and also blisters and just taping things up. And I'm going to be rereading Fixing Your Feet, which is the book that I recommend to everyone and has really changed the way I look after my feet in adventures and events. But clearly I really messed up on this trip because my feet got wet and blisters, and my feet were painful and a lot of pain from the backpack. My feet were the worst part of this trip. They were just a mess. So I need to really spend some time evaluating how I could improve on that for the future. Now for shoes, I was in a big debate about what to wear. So debating between leather boots, which I knew would be waterproof but hot and heavy, my Solomon hiking shoes, which I knew would be waterproof-ish and comfortable, but the toe box isn't as wide as I like. They're a bit crampy on my toes. Or the shoes that I did wear, my Solomon Olympus shoes, which are my long-distance running shoes, which have a great foot-shaped toe box, a really thick, cushy sole for going long distance, and they're so comfortable, so comfortable, but they're not waterproof. And I thought I would pair those with waterproof socks, which is what everyone does here in terms of long-distance running and running in the wet. It's customary to wear non-Gore-Tex running shoes and pair them with waterproof socks. However, I learned on this trip that waterproof socks do have a limit, and when you're walking in wet conditions for 5 days in a row, they get saturated. So I actually ended up buying a second pair of waterproof socks so I could swap them out, but it was just a mess. My feet were soaking wet for like 5 days straight. It was not good. And that set the tone for the rest of the trip because my feet were pretty messed up. Again, I need to evaluate options. I actually ended up buying a second pair of shoes, which I think was probably a mistake. But again, more on this in the book when it comes out because I will have had more time to analyze the situation. But my feet were so messed up that I was just looking through all of my pictures of the trip, and I have so many pictures of my feet. It was like I have this documentation of like how my feet were taped up and powdered, and oh, it was just a mess. So that was bad, and I need to fix that. So what is the trail actually like? And I left this out when I did my original notes for this episode, and then I realized that's kind of the whole point, to give you an idea of what the trail is like. So, as you know, it starts in St. Bees. We started in the west, and we traveled up north on the Saturday, the 30th, and stayed overnight at Seacoast Caravan and Camping. And I think there's one other tent there that night, but it was pretty much just us and a big field. The weather was quite bad. It was rainy and windy, and it was kind of a rough night, but we got through it, and we started the next morning in pouring rain and decked out in our waterproofs. And that was a very wet start to the walk, and the first few days were very, very wet. Now, I didn't realize this because I had never spent much time up in the lake. I'd never been to the Lake District before, but the lakes are very wet. It's very rainy up there, so that's something that you might want to be aware of if you're starting your walk there. The rest of the trip, once we got out of the lakes, I think we had some like drizzle sometimes, and we certainly had wind, especially in the North York Moors, but the weather was really good. We had clear skies, or at least gray skies, but no rain the rest of the trip. So the rain was mostly confined to the Lake District. So we had a great first day. I think we did 14 miles or 26 kilometers, and we stayed at the Ennerdale Bridge. There's a pub there, and we camped in the pub garden, and that was great. It was really convenient. It was Sunday. We had a roast dinner at the pub. We were able to charge things in the pub, and this is important. I didn't realize how easy it would be to charge things along the way. So that's why, I brought 2 power banks, because I thought, well, I need to have a backup, and I didn't. I really only used one, and I was able to charge it and my devices various times along the way. Mostly at pubs when we were eating or staying there. So that was a really wet but beautiful day, and it was just exciting to be on the trail, and I was getting used to the weight of my pack, which my shoulders did hurt a little bit in the beginning, and then once the weight went down as I was eating my food and I got used to things, it was much more comfortable. So the next day, we went from Ennerdale Bridge all the way around Ennerdale Water, and this will make sense to you if you watch some YouTube videos about the trail, to a place called Borrowdale, where we camped in this really lovely, giant farmer's field that he had for camping. It was really, really nice. That was, I think, a 15-mile day. It was another great day. It was a great evening. I remember being really exhausted. There's this picture of me just lying on the ground, exhausted, when we got in, and I remember being really, really hungry. I wasn't eating enough the first couple of days, and then we kind of got into the habit of having proper meals on the trail in addition to trail snacks, and that helped a lot. So Borrowdale was lovely. Borrowdale is one of the rainiest parts of the country, I later read in my guidebook, so it makes sense that the lakes are so rainy. But it was really lovely. Now, we were planning to do a wild camp that night, but we didn't, because it would have made for a really short day, and we wanted to continue on. It was a really beautiful day. So the second day was where we walk by Black Sail Hut, which is, I think, the most remote youth hostel in the country. And it's this cute little building up in the middle of nowhere. It's really lovely. It wasn't open when we were there, because I think they open at 5 p.m., but they do have an honesty bar. So you walk in, you can plug your stuff in. So again, you can charge. And we took an hour break there and had some lunch. And they have a refrigerator with drinks, and they have a kettle where you can make tea and coffee. And they had cakes and crisps and fruit and candy and all kinds of snacks. So it was really easy to refuel on the go, and it was just really nice to have little places like this to just stop and rest and eat. Black Sail Hut, I really, really loved. I saw it in all the YouTube videos that I watched, and it was just really nice to actually visit there. Third day, we left Borrowdale, and we were going to try to get to Angle Tarn to Wild Camp, but we ended up staying at Grisdale Tarn, which was a few kilometers shorter, because it was a really long day and it was a tough day, and it was so lovely to Wild Camp. I mean, we had to go down a little bit from the Tarn, which is a lake, and we set up camp on this flat kind of area, and it was really windy, and it was kind of a rough night again. But when we woke up the next morning, the cloud had come in, and we were just all surrounded by cloud, and it was just foggy, and it was beautiful. It was really, really lovely. It just felt really magical and wild, and I loved it. That was a great night. And I've got pictures of that camp on my Instagram account if you want to take a look at it. That was another long day. That was a bit of a longer day than I think the previous days, and I remember it being a really tough day for me. So the next day, we intended to get from Grisdale Tarn to Shap, and that didn't work out the way we planned. We got up early, we were walking all day, it was a fairly long day, and it was about, 7 or 8 in the evening when we realized we weren't going to get into Shap until quite late, and so we decided to wild camp alongside the reservoir. And we didn't know this at the time, but that was going to be the second and last wild camp that we would do. And it was really lovely. We got in at about 8 o'clock, made the call to stay there, found a nice flat spot, and then waited until the sun went down a little bit before we pitched our tents. And that worked out really well. And then the next day was when we had a shorter rest day at Shap. What happened was, I think we kind of burnt ourselves out a little bit in the Lake District, and then one of the group needed a rest, and I realized that was very welcome. So we did a very short day of just like 6 kilometers and then had a rest day in Shap. And Shap ended up being a really nice place to have a rest day. We couldn't find a B&B, which is what we initially wanted, so we could dry out some of our stuff. But what we did do was we got the camping pods at the Crown and stayed in there. Later, we regretted that and wished we had camped rather than staying in the pods, but it was fine. We had a hot shower, and the pub was unusually warm. They kept the heating really cranked up in there, so I was able to put my shoes by the fire, dry out my shoes, which was really good. And we also had a place to charge. We had a beer in the pub in the evening and charged all of our stuff. So I definitely do think you do need to bring a battery pack, but you probably don't need to bring 2 large ones like I did. You don't need to. I mean, unless you've got like cameras and drones and phones and like tons of stuff to charge, you don't need to bring so many charging devices as I did. So Shap was a great day. We found this really great little cafe. I think it was the Abbey Kitchen. And we had breakfast there and we had lunch there, and it was just a really great place. The owner of the place was a walker. She had walked the Camino de Santiago, I think 5 times. And so she was giving us tips about walking, and the staff was just lovely. It was great. So that was a very much needed rest day after we had put in some really tough times on the trail in the Lake District. So from Shap, we went to Kirkby Stephen, and that's one of the first big towns that you see on the trail. And this was where I bought new shoes, which again may have been a mistake. I think hindsight is 20/20, and I didn't know that the rest of the trail would be quite dry, so I could have gotten by in my original shoes, which were not waterproof. But I didn't know that at the time, and I was expecting really wet and boggy trails, which was not the reality. So I bought new shoes, and they weren't great. But Kirkby Stephen is the place to do this. So you've got 2 outdoor shops. One of them is bigger than the other, where you can get new shoes, where you can get new gear. They've got jackets, all kinds of stuff. So anything that you need that you might not have, you can get there. This is a really good place to kind of resupply. There's also a co-op where you can stock up on food, and we did some of that. And there we stayed at this great campsite called the Pennine View Campground. They had a great shower, they had a kitchen with a kettle. It was really nice. And I remember that was a really long day. That was our first 20-mile day. or I think 33 kilometers. And that was a tough day. I remember we got in and I just kind of collapsed next to my tent, and then I realized I had to get myself up and eat and shower. And I went to bed at 6:30 in the afternoon and woke up around midnight, kind of organized my stuff, and then slept again until 6 or 7. So this is another thing that's really important. I'm not an early riser usually, but we got into the habit of getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning for a 6 o'clock start. And I found that really easy to adjust to, surprisingly. And I found it really nice to get up so early. And this was possible because we were camping. So when I stay at B&Bs, you usually get breakfast in the morning, and that usually doesn't happen before 8 o'clock. So that means you have to get a later start. But I really enjoyed having the early starts. And this is something that I wouldn't have done if I hadn't been doing the walk with other people, because I wouldn't have thought to get up that early because that's just not my lifestyle, but I really, really enjoyed it. And of course that meant that by 8 o'clock or 8:30 in the evening, I was tired and going to bed. So it was very different schedule than what I'm used to on my walks and in my life, and I liked it. So that was nice. So this is day 7. We went from Kirkby Stephen to Keld, so I got my shoes in the morning. We had coffee and breakfast at Costa. We really wanted like a nice cooked breakfast at a cafe, but for some reason, things didn't open very early in Kirkby Stephen, so we ended up at Costa. And shop for shoes, shop for food, and then this was where we had that kind of option in the trail where we could, depending on the date, go up to 9 Standards Rigs, or there's 2 other tracks you could take. So the time of year that we were doing it, May, meant that we had to go up to the 9 Standards. And the 9 Standards rigs they're like giant cairns. I don't know how old they are. It's been hard to find information about them, but they seem to be quite ancient. So there's a long climb up to the top there. And it was just really lovely. It was so nice to see something that I had seen in all the videos. I don't know. It was really, really lovely. And from there, it was kind of uphill and then downhill. And we went through these farms, and it was really beautiful. So we're very much in the Yorkshire Dales National Park now. So it's like rolling green hills and just lambs everywhere. And it was just really nice. At Keld, we stayed in, I think it was called Bruken's Park Lodge, or Caravan Farm, or something like that. It was this really lovely campsite where they had a couple of different levels. So they had this big field at the top, and then further down there was a middle level, and then further down there was this other level by the river where you could camp. And we stayed in the middle level, and it ended up being quite cold because, of course, cold air drops at night, heat rises. I didn't think about that when we chose our campsite, but when we woke up the next morning, my tent was frozen. It was covered with frost, and when I rolled up my tent to put it away, it was crunchy, and that had never happened to me before. And that was a bit of a rough night for me. I slept through, I'd say, the first 2/3 of the night, and then I woke up and couldn't sleep anymore just because I was so cold, and that was the only night that I was too cold. But this was the day where we went through to Reeth and beyond. Now, Reeth is a place I'd been to before. It was the location of one of my navigation courses, and so I kind of knew a little bit of the trail, and it was really lovely to revisit this route that I hadn't been to in, 3 or 4 years. So this is another point where you could take the high route or the low route, and we took the low route, which part of it follows the Swale Trail, which goes through Swaledale. And again, Dale is a valley. So we went through just a little bit of woodland alongside the river. It was really, really lovely. We went through some meadows. In the Yorkshire Dales, you have these really beautiful dry stone walls, and they have very narrow openings to walk through, and it can be quite tricky. So this was a bit slow, this part, going through all these fields. We had to go through so many different fields and pass through so many different walls. And every time you have to kind of climb up, squeeze through, especially if you've got a big backpack, it's quite difficult, and then jump down at the end. So it was a bit slow going, but it was really beautiful, and it was green and just lovely. This day was a bit tough. It was another longish day. I found it really challenging, and we stopped off at Reeth and had a burger and had some ice cream, and we went to this shop and got some more snacks. That was kind of our refueling place, and it was really, really nice. And from there we pushed on to this farm at Nuncote Nook where we camped. I really like camping at farms. Woman has this little shop and she does breakfast and she does dinner, which we didn't take advantage of, but she served us tea and biscuits when we got in. It was really, really nice and had a really warm, hot shower. The bathrooms were great. The bathrooms there, she lets you use the toilets and the showers in the house. So there's kind of a separate entrance and it was just warm and it was really nice to have a warm place to shower because sometimes campsite showers, the water's hot, but then this room itself is cold. So you kind of freeze when you get out. I took more showers than I thought I was going to take on this trip. Since we thought we were going to wild camp, I honestly didn't think I was going to get more than 1 or 2 showers, but there were a lot of showers, which was nice. So I'm just looking through my notes as I tell you the story. And this was the day that I think we all found it really challenging. And we decided to start doing like a gratitude list. Like whenever we would complain about being tired or feet hurting or whatever, we would say the things that we were grateful for in terms like what we enjoyed about the day. You know, I enjoyed the lambs and I enjoyed the hills and so I have this in my notes because I remember this was actually a really important mindset shift because this was a tough day for me. I remember just being really, really tired and shifting that around from complaining to talking about the things that we enjoyed really, really helped. So I think this is a good technique for the future. So this was the point where we really started to reevaluate our long days and distances and things. So we were originally supposed to walk to Danby Whisk this day, but this was the first day that I woke up not feeling great and I really wanted to go back to sleep after I turned off my alarm, and that was the first time that it happened. So we hiked into Richmond and had a really good breakfast there. And that was where we decided to kind of replan the rest of the trip and stretch it out a little bit. This was another really lovely walk through the Yorkshire Dales and just pretty green hills. I don't know. It was another really lovely day in the Dales. And I remember being really tired when we got into the campsite that night. So we stayed at another farm, which was really nice. Another place where we got in, got settled. They brought us tea on a tray. It was lovely. And this was another place where we could charge. So we ended up being the only people staying at this farm. And they had hot showers and bathroom, and there was an outlet. There was a kettle, and we didn't need the kettle, so we unplugged it, and we were able to charge some things. And I was able to wash some clothes. So there was a heated towel rack in the shower room, and so I was able to wash some clothes and hang them on the towel rack and get them dry for the next day. And I think that was the first day that I was able to do some laundry, but when I was in Shap, staying at the Crown, the woman there had done some laundry for me, which was nice. So there were a couple of times when I was able to do laundry throughout the trip. For some reason I thought it would be easier, but because it had been so wet at the start, it wasn't. So it was nice to have this. So the next day was another long day. It was just over 20 miles. And here we went from Brompton-on-Swale, where we'd stayed at the farm, to Ingleby Cross. And this was the kind of shift out of the Yorkshire Dales and into the North York Moors. And it was a tough day. So this was a day that had lots of walking on country roads. It was really hard on the feet, and the wind really picked up. We had really hard gusts of wind, I think going up to 40 miles an hour towards the end of the day. This was the day where I felt like I was going to get pushed over by the wind. It was a challenging day, partly because of the roads and partly because of the wind over the moors. And in the moors, it's just open, flat fields of heather, and you don't have trees and you don't have anything to stop the wind. So when you've got wind up there, it has nothing to stop it. It just blows and blows. So there were a couple of challenging days with the wind, and it was right around this time. So this was day 10. And the next day, I think, was even worse. So we stayed in this little tiny village called Ingleby Cross, and we camped at a pub there, and it was just really nice. There were a couple of other campers there that we had seen a few times along the way, and it was just nice to kind of reconnect with people and meet up with them at the end of the day. Day 11, we were intending to wild camp at night, but we ended up staying at a campsite instead. So we went from Ingleby Cross to a place called Lordstones, which was a couple of kilometers before where we initially planned to stop. This was a day that was kind of sunny, kind of alternating between sunny and dark clouds, but then we had these really strong gusts of wind, and I really felt like I was going to fall over a couple times. So we had breakfast and then walked through a really pretty woodland for a bit, and I remember feeling like it was so good to see trees in what felt like ages. So we had some ups and downs through the hills and went through a plantation. I think this was the day where there was some trees had been harvested and there was a diversion to the trail, but the sign wasn't clear. So we went where we weren't supposed to go and had to climb over some trees. But it was nice to see trees, even though some of them were being cut down. And we got into the Lordstones, which is this, I think it's a country park, around just before 4 o'clock. And we saw some people there that we had been seeing on and off that we'd camped with the previous night, and they were staying there to camp. We went into the shop to buy some things, and they said, you have 15 minutes to decide whether you're going to camp here or not, and we decided to go for it. And it was really nice. So the cafe was closed there, sadly. The restaurant was closed. The shop had 15 minutes before they closed, but we were able to stock up on some things and then get settled in the campsite. And Lordstones is a place that charges £25 for camping, which is really expensive, but they have a special price for coast-to-coast walkers. And so they put you in a special field, but you get all of the same toilets and showers as the normal campers. So it was a really, really nice place. It was quite quiet. It was just us, the other 3 tents of people that we had kind of been seeing on and off, and then a couple of people arrived quite late and pitched their tents further down. The big surprise here was actually seeing the Lordstones. So there was this kind of semicircle of standing stones just a little ways off from where we were camping. And it was really, really lovely. It was a really nice sight. So it was nice to see. And it was a lovely surprise. So the next morning, it was day 12, we went from the Lordstones to the Lion Inn. And we had a bit of a late start because we had to turn in our keys to get our deposit for the keys back. It wasn't a very efficient system that they had. So we got a later start, had some climbing to do. It was a really lovely day. And this was the day where we had, again, another choice where we could take the high route or the low route. Sadly, I forgot that until we got to the top of the first peak. But then I saw the low route below and we decided we're going to take the low route from then on. So we did that. It was really nice. We were following the Cleveland Way this day. So there's a section where the coast to coast follows part of the Cleveland Way. And so you no longer follow coast to coast signs for several hours. You're following Cleveland Way signs. And that's another national trail. So this was another day that was really, really windy. It felt like a long day, even though it wasn't, but just the wind was really tiring. And I remember being really, really tired and just seeing open moors and nothing. And then finally, off in the distance, we saw the Lion Inn, which is this really remote pub where we were camping that night. And I just remember feeling so much relief when we saw that. And the Lion Inn is, you'll see it if you watch videos of the coast to coast. It's really, really lovely. It's this pub in the middle of nowhere. Lots of coast-to-coast campers will camp there. They also have rooms, which are pretty much taken up by coast-to-coast walkers. And I don't know, it's just a nice, cozy pub, great food in the middle of nowhere. And it was just such a nice place to get in out of the wind. The wind was terrible. Next day was day 13, getting towards the end, walking through the North York Moors still. There's this ancient cross just off the path called Fat Betty, where it's a tradition to take some food and leave some food. So we walked by Fat Betty. I left a Trek bar, and I took a Kindle knit cake. And it was just, I don't know, fun to do this tradition thing that I'd seen on videos. I'd seen other people doing it, and it's just a weird thing that people do. And I found that really fun. I don't know. So it was a fairly easy trail. It was fairly flat, but hard on the feet. So there was a lot of kind of hard-packed dirt and gravel on this trail, I remember. And I remember just my feet being really tired. My feet were a lot tired than I'm telling you, a lot more tired than I'm telling you. They were aching a lot of the time. Not only from the weight in my pack, but from the shoes, which just weren't right, and from the blisters that I got the first few days. That's all I'm going to say about that. Otherwise, this would be like a lament about my feet. But it was not all fun and games. So we were originally planning to stay at Glaisdale and didn't. The place had a weird vibe and it was just kind of dead and there weren't very many facilities. Like the pub that was supposed to be there, which was the only place to eat, was closed and it was just not great. So we ended up going onwards a little bit to Egton Bridge, which was just 45 minutes away. And we actually stayed in a hotel there. So it was this little country hotel that was lovely. They had decent food, good breakfast in the morning. Nice place to stay. They also have a shop, which we didn't manage to get to because it closed by the time we'd finished settling in, but it was just nice. And again, that's a place where we could charge our stuff, take a shower. It was nice. So originally, as I'd said, we had planned to stay at a hotel halfway through. We didn't, because I guess we just didn't feel the need to. I didn't feel the need to, but it was nice to have a place to kind of settle in for the night. And I remember we were talking about, is this going to make us soft? Like, is this going to be harder on the trail the next day? It wasn't. It was fine. We just had a good rest and went on our way. So from Egton Bridge, we went through Gromont, which is where most people stay. And we didn't realize when we stopped at Egton Bridge how close Gromont was, but we could have stayed there and we could have camped there. So it was just less than an hour into Gromont. And then from there was a big climb out of Gromont. And we saw this huge, I don't know if there's a deer park or a massive herd of red deer on the right. We actually stood there for a while taking pictures of them. I'd never seen anything like that before. They were really lovely. And then moors. And then we went off the moors, into Littlebeck, which is this really pretty woodland, really lovely, just alongside the stream. We saw this cave, which was left over from, I think, mining. And there was like a Hermitage cave, which has the date of 1790. I don't know if someone actually lived in there or if that was just a folly that someone had made. And then we came across Falling Foss. So a foss is a waterfall. It was really lovely, but there were tons of people here because it was a Saturday and it's clearly a tourist trap, but it was lovely. It was really nice to walk through there. And then we found this tea garden at the waterfall. And that was a really nice surprise. I hadn't seen that in any of the videos that I'd watched. And we were able to get some lunch there. It was really nice. So originally we had been debating about whether to have a short second to last day and then a medium last day, but we decided to flip those on their head and go a little bit further this day and stay at High Hosker, which is really close to the end. And so as we were getting closer to our destination, we realized how close we were to the actual end of the trail. And we decided we were going to see if we felt up to walking all the way through or if we were going to stay at High Hosker. And in the end, this is where my feet did not allow us to push on, or did not allow me to push on. We decided to stick together. So we camped at High Hosker and stayed the night at another caravan campground. So again, this was a place where they had a restaurant, they had a shop. I guess we could have charged things if we needed to, but it was kind of the last night, so we didn't. And just had a leisurely evening as we got ready to do a very short walk into Robin Hood's Bay the next day. So we had a really short walk the next day. It was just 2 hours. We started at 7:45 and got in at 9:45. So it was nice to have a short day and to get in early rather than pushing on the previous evening. I was really conflicted about that, just having such a short day, but it ended up being nice because we got there early in the morning. There weren't many tourists out. It was really quiet. We were able to walk to the sea and throw in our pebbles and then have a quiet breakfast. I thought it was nice. And then that gave us plenty of time to get to Middlesbrough, which is where we were staying the night before taking the coach back home the following day. So that wasn't the greatest telling of the story, and I think that will definitely get better when I'm writing my book because I'm more of a writer than a speaker, and it's hard to condense 2 weeks of adventure into a half an hour, and this actually is longer than I thought it was going to be. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed hearing that, and I hope it gave you a feeling for what it's like to go on the trail, but what's really going to give you a feeling of what the trail is like is to watch people's videos and see what it looks like. Again, you're going through those 3 national parks, and so you're getting 3 very different types of scenery and nature and wildlife, and it's such a great experience. How can you do Wainwright's Coast to Coast Walk? I would say start out by choosing a guidebook. Now, I brought the Trailblazer Guide, which is what I usually buy. I like them because they have these cute little hand-drawn maps that kind of explain all the highlights and the stuff to look out for, which is nice. But not as practical on this trail as it is on other trails. So one of the guys that I was walking with brought the Cicerone guidebook, which comes in 2 parts. One part is just the OS maps for the trail, and the other part is the guidebook. That's what I would bring this time, and I'm linking to both of these in the show notes. So I'd say choose a guidebook, or maybe 2, and start researching. Next, decide if you're going to do it solo or with friends. Now, this is unlike other trails that I've walked in the sense that it's not signposted all the way through because, again, it's not an official trail. So in the Yorkshire Dales and in the North York Moors, there are a lot of signs. It's not totally signposted, and you're going to need a map and you're going to need to know where you're going, but it's pretty well signposted. In the Lake District, it is not marked at all. So there are cairns that will mark the footpaths that the coast to coast goes along, but when you see the cairn, you're not sure if it's actually coast to coast unless you're actually navigating, so you can't just follow the cairns. So you definitely need to know how to navigate, and you definitely need good maps, and you need to know how to use a map. So again, solo or with friends. If your map reading skills are not great, I would say brush up on them or go with friends that do know how to navigate. That might help. However, ideally, you all want to know how to navigate for a trail like this. Next, decide how you want to do it. Do you want to camp the whole way like we did? Do you want to stay at B&Bs? Do you want to do a mix? You could do like 2 nights camping, 1 B&B. You could do B&Bs halfway through. You could do whatever. But that's going to kind of help you decide how you want to split up the route. Next, do you want to get your luggage transferred? Now, you can do this for both B&Bs and camping. There are luggage transfer services along most of the national trails and other routes here in the UK. And you can just hike with a day pack and get your luggage transferred. A lot of people that we saw, especially older walkers, did that. And here's where I need to say, all ways are valid. However you choose to do this is great. Do what works for you. So we were hiking with these big packs, and people would always see us and they'd be like, oh, you're doing it the real way. You're doing it the right way. Not like those day packers. And that's BS. Like, do what you need to do to have this adventure. Like, if you want to get your luggage transferred, do it. Like, don't feel guilty about it. There are plenty of people that do that, and it's totally fine. So plan your adventure in a way that works for you. I know I say that all the time, but it's true. Next, you need to decide whether you're going to go from west to east or east to west. So most people walk this trail from St. Bees in the west to Robin Hood's Bay in the east. And that's because there's this idea that way you'll have a tailwind the whole way rather than a headwind. However, the trail doesn't go strictly from east to west. It kind of meanders. And there were many, many times, especially in the North York Moors, where the wind was coming at me from the side. So it doesn't really matter which direction you do it in. There's only one point, I would say, for about an hour or so on the North York Moors, and we had a really, really windy day, and we had gusts of up to 40 miles an hour, and it was just so exhausting. But there's only a period of about an hour of that where I felt like I had a bit of a tailwind. I felt like the wind was kind of pushing me. So 1 hour out of 2 weeks, I think, is not enough to say that you definitively need to do it from west to east. However, weather changes, weather is different, your results may vary, but I think you can do it in either direction. And the people that we saw doing it from east to west didn't complain about the wind any more than we did. So I think it's good both ways. Next, you need to decide how many days you want to split the walk up in. Some people do it in as little as 5 or 6 days. Some people do it in 10 or 11 days. Some people do it in more like 18 days, but I think 2 weeks is about the norm. And I would say 14 to 15 days should be good. You might want to add an extra day in if you want to break and maybe have some flexibility. So originally we were going to do it in 14 days, then we changed to 13, and then it ended up being 15. So allow for flexibility, because if this is a bigger adventure than what you're used to, you might find that you need more time than you estimated. And the Lake District is more strenuous. You've got a lot more climbing in that and a lot more really technical downhills. So you might want to plan shorter days in that section and spread the lakes out a little bit. If I were going to do this trail again, I would definitely have shorter days in the Lake District so that I could enjoy them more and not pressure myself to get through each day, because I really enjoyed the lakes and they were really hard. It was really, really challenging for me. You also want to get a feel for the different alternative routes, so the high-low routes, the different routes around lakes, that kind of thing. And obviously, the route that you choose is going to depend on the conditions, the weather conditions on the day that you reach that point, but it's a good idea to know what the options are. Next, I would say to watch some YouTube videos, and I'm going to link to what I think are the best ones in the show notes so that you can get to know the trail. I probably watched at least 25 or 30 YouTube videos about the coast to coast. And it was great because I got to see the route from different people's perspectives and different people's experiences. I mean, there was one video where I remember it snowed this time of year, and that was really interesting to know because I hadn't thought that might be an option. So yeah, I think it's really useful to see other people's experiences, and it will give you an idea of what you're going to come across, like the different sites you're going to see, the different landscapes. And I got really excited because I'd seen so many of these videos, and there were certain points and things that I remembered. When I saw those places in real life, it was really exciting. It was like, oh, I remember this from the videos. So I really enjoyed that. Again, get comfortable with navigation if you aren't already, and then plan as usual. So get your packing list out, really revise it, don't pack your fears like I did, and pack as little as you need to. So since I started sharing about this on Instagram, people have been asking me, will there be a book? Yes, there will be a book, but I didn't record my experience as I usually do, like I said, on my iPad, so the book will probably be different. I took lots of notes, but it's not the same as actually writing up the chapter, so it's probably going to be different, and I don't know how it's going to be different, but we shall see. And there were some days where I was too tired to even take notes, so I took the notes the next day. And as I said, there wasn't as much inner reflection, so again, it's probably going to be a different book to my usual book, but there will be a book because I really enjoyed this trail. It was a great experience. I want to share it with other people, and I would love to encourage other people to walk this trail. I think it was really, really good, and I enjoyed it. So that's all for now. If you have any questions about my coast-to-coast experience, please drop me a line and let me know. You can email me at holly@hollyworton.com. Don't hesitate to send me questions, because that will help me know what people need to know for the book. I find it really, really useful to know what questions people have. So again, holly@hollyworton.com, or you can find me online and get in touch there. If you enjoyed this episode, you might want to check out these related episodes. 438, I talk with Jenny Mowbray about solo travel and adventure when you're in a relationship. And of course, this wasn't solo travel, but I wasn't going with my partner, so I was away from home. 376, I talk about long-distance walks, time and space to think and reflect, and that was a similar episode, but about my Ridgeway walk that I did a couple of years ago. 368, I talked to Yvette Webster about how to take your hiking to the next level, which is exactly what I did here. 367, I talk about finding yourself through solo travel and outdoor adventures. And 364, I talk about personal growth through outdoor adventure. So, hope you found this interesting and useful, and thank you for listening. Remember to visit hollyworton.com/461 for the show notes on this episode. Happy trails to you. Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Worton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollyworton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Worton. That's patreon.com/Holly Worton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.